but we'll get started in just a few minutes, so hold tight. All right, it looks like it's time to begin. So we might just take a minute here for our team to start the recording. So I'll give them a second to get that all geared up. All right, looks like we're all ready to get started. So I wanted to welcome you all to today's Alzheimer's Live Chat. My name is Lakelyn Hogan, and I am the Caregiver Advocate with Home Instead Senior Care. I wanted to thank you again so much for joining us today. Our live chats are brought to you by Home Instead Senior Care, a family network of locally owned franchise offices and your trusted home care agency, helping you keep your aging loved ones in their homes as they grow older. And before we get started with our chat today, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. So we'll look at the next slide here. I wanted to let you know we muted all of your lines to reduce the background noise. We want you to be able to still move around, talk to people as needed. Don't worry, we won't be able to hear you on our end. And if you have questions, please type them into the questions box. We already have one great question. We can't wait to get to that. And the topic is about Alzheimer's and wandering today, but of course we welcome any other questions you might have in regards to Alzheimer's. But again, today's topic is focused on wandering. And don't worry about taking notes. We're going to email you a link with the recording of today's live chat, and then also email you the links that we reference throughout today's presentation. And again, that email will be sent out to you after today's live chat is over, and you can watch it, you can share it with friends, family members, all that good stuff. And I did want to just quickly mention, yesterday was World Alzheimer's Day. I'm not sure if everyone was aware of that, and over 46.8 million people are affected by this disease worldwide. So yesterday there was a lot of buzz around Alzheimer's, a lot of attention in the media, social media. So the awareness about the disease is growing, which is always exciting to see. So I hope that that brings us some hope as we talk about such a difficult topic. But back to today's live chat, I'm really looking forward to this topic. I get lots of questions about it, and I know our expert that we have joining us, she also gets lots of questions, and that's Alzheimer's and wandering. And many of you sent in some great questions beforehand, so we're going to get to those. And again, if you have questions, please start entering them into the questions box there on your screen. And as we go along, if questions pop up, you can enter a question at any time, so don't hesitate. But today I'd like to welcome back Karen Garner. She is our expert for today's live chat. Karen was a caregiver. Hi, Karen. How are you?
Hi. I'm good. How are you, Lakelyn? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I was just going to do a quick introduction about you, if that's all right, and then we'll jump into questions.
Oh, yes, please do.
All right. Karen was a caregiver for her husband, Jim, who had younger onset Alzheimer's disease. And Jim recently passed away, and Karen continues to share her family's experience through her advocacy work and also works to encourage and support family caregivers that are affected by Alzheimer's disease. Karen is also a mother of two, which keeps her very busy, and she is the founder of the Garner Foundation. And you can read about her experiences at missingjim.com and on our website, helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. So again, Karen, welcome to today's webinar. We're so happy to have you.
And I am so happy to be here with you and with everyone else listening. Thank you guys so much for listening in. And I am really excited about some of these questions because it seems like we have some topics that keep rearing their ugly heads, and I am excited to be able to help so many people that are struggling day to day with caregiving of loved ones. So thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this.
Absolutely. And before the live chat, Karen and I were talking about how prevalent wandering is becoming, and we were sharing some of our stories, and later on we might bring up a couple of those experiences that we have had with Alzheimer's and wandering. But first, I wanted to get to a few of the questions that we received in regards to wandering. So if it's okay with you, Karen, I thought we'd dive right in with one of the first questions.
That's great. Shoot them out.
All right. Okay. So our first question comes from Joan. And Joan says, my husband is a little over 2 months in at a care facility. He has early stage dementia plus a number of issues, including schizophrenia. He is 65 and I am 60. We have dealt with this issue for 25 years, and for the last 15, we have been together 24/7. This is a major adjustment for both of us. His wandering is what made his out-of-home placement needed. What do I say to him when he asks me when he's getting out? He also asks if I have someone else or if I don't want him anymore. This tears my heart out, and I am having issues with loneliness and sleeping at night. I just need advice. Wow, this is a hard one.
It really is. Joan, first of all, my heart goes out to you because, this man that you have loved for so many years and had such a wonderful, close relationship with doesn't recognize the relationship that you've had, and that's got to be very difficult for you. Unfortunately, this is very common with dementia patients, not just Alzheimer's, but all dementias. And so I want you to know, as hard as it is, you're not alone in this. This is very common. And unfortunately, though, along with that diagnosis comes something that happens like this that cannot be helped. And so when I say that, there's not really anything you can do as far as all of a sudden flipping a switch and he's going to remember the past, 25 years that you guys have had together. All he's going to do is look at you and wonder why you're leaving him there and what's happened to your relationship. And sometimes dementia patients do get confused, and they think maybe you have found somebody else, which it sounds like your husband has done. So I know it's heartbreaking for you, but a couple of things that you can do. One is just always reassure him every single time how much you love him, that you are there for him and you're going to continue to be there for him, that you're not going anywhere. And, excuse me, I'm so sorry. And that you have to just let him know that you are not going anywhere. So that's very important because they get scared. They know something is wrong with him and they can't quite put their finger on it. And you said he's got some schizophrenia issues as well. So I'm wondering if he is having schizophrenia issues, if he has been diagnosed by a physician, and if he is on some kind of medication. There are some medications out there that not only can help with the schizophrenia, but the paranoia, and it sounds like he does have some paranoia going along with his wondering if you are going to leave him and why you're not there with him. So I am not an advocate for putting somebody on a lot of medication. I think that that can be very dangerous for dementia patients because they can't communicate with you if they feel like there's too much change going on in their body, and they also can't tell you if the medication is inadvertently causing other problems, because sometimes there are side effects and you have to worry about that. But also the medication can help with the schizophrenia, and then also possibly to help with the issues he's having. So with his wandering, there are things you can do there. So at the facility, it should be a locked facility. And what I mean by a locked facility, if you're not familiar with that, if you're listening, is you have to have a code to get out of the building or some kind of pass. You can get in usually rather easily, but getting out of the facility, you have to have the capability of pressing a code or having a key or something along those lines. And if that's the case, then he should be safe in that facility. But if he is wandering and getting out of that, then that would definitely be a concern, especially with the winter months coming up. I think you're located in Nebraska, so you guys definitely have a cold winter, and you do not want him wandering out by himself in that kind of weather. So that's something that they should have a person there at the facility that you can speak with about these issues that you're having. Communication is very important, not just with the person that you're caring for, but communication is very important with all of the caregivers that they have there at the facility. Everyone there, from the front office staff to the cleaning staff to the people that bring in the meals, anybody that's going to be coming in and out, they need to be aware that your husband has this wandering issue and be on the lookout if he's standing by the door. I know in Jim's facility, there were certain people there that lived there, and they just stood by the door. Some of them were pretty slick. They would stand there, and if you held the door open for any length of time, I'm talking 10 seconds, they were there trying to get out themselves. So I think it's very important to have this open communication with the staff and let them know that this is a concern of yours, and for everyone to be aware and to keep their eyes open. So it sounds like you have a couple of things going on. You have an emotional side going on with him wanting to know when he's leaving, if you're seeing someone else and so forth. That's very emotionally hard. And then you've got the wandering side. So there's two different things going on. Again, talking to his doctor, talking to the staff there, and reassuring him. And that he could continue for quite a while asking you these same questions, and it will stay just as hard, over the coming weeks as it was the first time he asked you. But in your heart, you know that you're doing the best you can for him and that you're caring for him and you're coming to visit him. And so I want you to remember that. Remember the conversations you had before about what was coming down the pike and that he understood and knew that this was an option. So just keep reassuring him and reminding him that you're going to be back the next day or whenever you're coming back, and let him know. Now, as far as you're having issues with loneliness and sleeping at night, please, please, please find someone to talk to. There are support groups out there. There's support groups not only through the Agency on Aging in your area. There should be support groups through the Alzheimer's Association. There should be some support groups maybe through your hospital system. I know sometimes they have them. So reach out and try to find other caregivers going through the same thing. It is a very lonely process to be a caregiver, whether the loved one's still living at home or they're in a facility. Either way, it's very lonely, and you need to get your rest, and you need to take care of yourself. So I also recommend not only finding that support group, but also finding a good counselor. Your insurance might possibly cover this. Find you a good counselor you can go talk to, and they can reassure you on a weekly or biweekly basis that you're doing the right thing, and you can get all of the issues that come up day to day off your chest. And so I think that's very important, because not only do you have to take care of him, but you really, really need to take care of yourself. So please, please, please do whatever you can to get yourself some sleep and to get some help for yourself.
That's a great answer, Karen. And I know I've talked with many families over the years, and it can be so hard to have to transition their loved one into a community setting, but sometimes different issues such as wandering can make it a little bit of a hazard to be at home. But there are many people living at home that are having some wandering issues. I know you have some great tips and advice on that, but I had one question that kind of segues us into that discussion. So I thought I'd bring up that question. And this comes from Robin. She says, is there some kind of electronic tracking device that can be put on the car or that my dad can have in his pocket that allows me to track where he is? So far, he does not drive any place he doesn't know or know how to get to, but I'm nervous that at some point he will get lost. And she said, FYI, he no longer has a cell phone because he stopped using it. So that's kind of a great segue into that topic. So are there any tracking devices that you're aware of, Karen, or any other tips that could help families that are caring for someone at home that's wandering? I'll let you take it from here.
Yes, there are quite a few, and one thing I would recommend, if you have access to a computer, is you can go on and Google tracking devices or location devices for dementia patients or for seniors. You can put in a couple of different things, and there's a long list, and I don't want to just sit and list them out, but you can also go online and look at reviews of them and see which one might fit your particular situation specifically. And so I say this to everybody listening because this is a great question, and there's a lot of different things. There's things you can put in their shoes that's like a shoe tracking device that's a GPS. There is some watches that you can do that, but see, a watch won't work if they won't wear the jewelry. So, and then the shoe one won't work if you're worried that if they wander, they might take off their shoes or their clothes, which happens quite frequently, unfortunately, with wanderers. So it would depend on your loved one and how they are. There is one called a Safe Link that is a small device carried by the person. You know, that may not work, or something in the pocket. So I really encourage you to go to the internet and do that, because there's quite a few devices, and it seems like every day there's another one coming on the market. Now, I would also like to point out, in our area where I live in Virginia, in our local area, there is a program through our sheriff's department, and they have a free program mainly for seniors, especially if they have dementia, where you go ahead and you fill out all of the paperwork with the sheriff's office. You give them a picture of your loved one, and they have that on record, so that if something comes up, it's that much quicker to put out an alert. And they also have a tracking device. It's like a bracelet that you can put on your loved one that's free of charge. Now, obviously, this is specific to our area, but I would encourage each of you listening to check in your local area and find out if there is something very similar that wouldn't cost you anything, because some of these devices can cost well over $100, and some of them you have to pay a monthly amount to them to have them track it for you, especially if they're not going to carry a phone where you can use a smartphone to track. So I would start with your local sheriff's department and see if they have anything for free. You can also contact, if you have an agency on aging, they may have some devices as well. But then you can go to a website like Alzheimer's.net or the Alzheimer's Association again, and put in devices to track loved ones who wander. And like I said, there's quite a few to choose from. And again, pinpoint it down to your specific situation, and if they will wear a watch, if they will carry something in their pocket, if you need to put something in their shoe. There's a lot of different options. And while we're on this, one suggestion that I had read quite a few years ago was, if you have a smartphone, each day, if you have a person that's wandering, each day, just snap a quick picture of them on your phone. They're digital. It doesn't cost you anything. It could be very quick, because what happens is you don't know what day or when they might wander away from you. And if you have taken a picture and you have the exact shirt and the exact look they have that day, or the clothing, then that will help you, and you'll have it right there that you can email to your local police department if you should need to have them put it out, and then you can also put it out on Facebook. So my suggestion as well is just each day snap a quick photo, and that way you'll have it. So I hope this helps, Robin. Thank you so much for sending that question in. That's a great one.
Karen, those are some great suggestions. I like the snapping a picture every day. I never would have thought of that, but that could really help in getting the word out more quickly when you know exactly what they're wearing and how to describe what they look like. And Holman said, we actually just came out with the Missing Senior Network, which is a website, and you can find it on preventwandering.com. And this is only for the U.S. We're working on it in Canada, but for this specific website, again, that's Missing Senior Network, and we'll send that out at the end of this presentation, but you can you can create an account for your loved one with information, and you can put all of your contacts in there. So if your senior loved one happens to wander, you can go onto the site and put an alert out to all those contacts, whether it's via email or text message, letting them know that your loved one is wandering, is missing, and then hopefully that will help get the word out faster and hopefully find them faster. So that's another resource that we recently came up with, because we're finding that this is a more and more common problem that families are facing. And the quicker you can get the word out, the more information that you can get out to those in your network, the better. And I liked your suggestion about going to the Sheriff's Department. And we had actually a listener, Luann, wrote that advice into our little chat box. So thanks, Luann. So your herd community must have that too. So it must be something that's catching on. So I'll have to check with my local community here to see if we have that as an option. But again, thank you for that question. And Luann also asked a question, so I'll go ahead and address her question now. She said, what are some of the effective distractor methods to prevent wandering? So Karen, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. Thanks, Luann, and I'm glad that your Sheriff's Department has that same program, it sounds like, which is good to hear. I don't know where you're located, but that's really good to hear, so I'm happy about that. So make sure you tell all your friends and neighbors about that program as well. So some tips to our distractions for wandering. Boy, that's a good one. Again, it will depend on the person that you're caring for, and there are a couple of tips that you can do. One is just to try to have structure. So you can create a daily plan. You can just try to keep the same timeline as far as when you have your meals, maybe when you go out, when you watch TV shows, when you do maybe some yard work or any, again, depending on what the person that you're caring for is able to do. So one is to carry out those daily activities on a regular routine that just helps them with that routine. Now, if your loved one is starting to wander or you think they may, you want to think about what time of day they are most likely to do that, and try to plan some activities at that time. So maybe late in the day you think they're going to wander, so activities and exercise can reduce their agitation and their restlessness and the likelihood that they will wander. That being said, there's also the flip side, where if they get too much stimulation, that can be confusing as well, and they can just bolt. I know I had that happen with Jim. One time we had gone out and run some errands, and when we pulled up in front of our house, he bolted out of the driveway, the actual sidewalk, and just took off down the street. And so our son went running after him, and it was a big mess, of course, because at that point, once he turned the corner from our block, I had no idea where he was, and it was really, really scary to think of him confused and alone and trying to figure out what he was doing because he just took off running. Luckily, we got him back, and when we got him back home, I asked him, why did you run off like that? And he said because he was trying to run away from the disease. He wanted to run, and I guess he was, in his mind, going to leave the disease behind if he ran far enough. So that was really heartbreaking to recognize. He knew something was wrong. He knew this disease was robbing him of his abilities, and he just wanted to get away from it, and that was the only thing he could come up with. And so sometimes wandering like this is going to happen when you least expect it and when you can't prevent it. But the best you can do is to reassure them that if they feel disoriented or abandoned, to just try to talk to them and explain to them where you are, that they're safe, and that they are home. Because a lot of times maybe they're trying to go to work if they have worked in the past, and they're thinking that they should be at work or they should be at a friend's house. So listening to them gives you a lot of clues on where they are, and that can change moment to moment. So that's really important. Also, make sure all their basic needs are met. Do they need to go to the bathroom? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they looking for something to do because they're really bored? Just keeping their needs met will be very, very important. All of these tips, by the way, are on the Alzheimer's Association website as well. They have some great tips, as well as a couple of other sites out there. So, and then another one is goes back to my story with Jim, is avoid busy places that can cause them to be disoriented. I think when I took Jim shopping, and then by the time we got home, he was just really overwhelmed, and his brain was just completely stimulated. So I think also, if you're worried about them wandering, you want to keep the car keys out of sight. You don't want them being able to drive. You can make sure the doors are locked. Sometimes they get to the point where they just can't figure out how to unlock the door. So that's something you can do as well. So as far as prevention and distraction, they sort of go hand in hand. But one of the things you can do to distract them is really just communicate and pay attention to them, which is really hard because that takes time. And when you run out of time because you have a lot of other stuff going on, they can just slip out the door. You might just be fixing them a meal, and you think they're in the other room, and the next thing you know, they're gone. So one thing that you can do is just trying to keep your eye on them and trying to keep them occupied and letting them know that they're safe.
Those are some great suggestions. I've also heard a lot of times you can find inexpensive, almost like a doorbell kind of alarms that you can have on the door that it dings when the door opens. So if you are in the house preparing a meal in one room and they're in another room, if they do exit, you could at least hear that chime go off so that you know that they've gotten away, or gotten out of the house or opened a door. So those are some great suggestions. We also had somebody else right now, Annie. She's listening right now. She asks, my husband is 79 and was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment about 4 years ago, and it's more like moderate stage now. And she says, at what period does wandering usually start? I thought that was a good question.
Well, that is a great question, Annie, and I am sorry about your husband. I definitely understand a lot of what's going on in your world right now. Well, first of all, what you need to understand is any person who has memory problems are at risk of wandering, and they don't even have to really be at the moderate stage. Even in the early stages, they can become disoriented and confused. So he is at risk just being in the moderate stages. And so if he hasn't started wandering, that's great. There is still a chance he might. And some of the signs that you can look for is, like I mentioned before, maybe if he used to work somewhere, he had obligations, maybe he volunteered or met with friends on a regular basis at a local restaurant for breakfast. If he starts talking about those things, for example, so he's retired from work or he had to quit work, and all of a sudden he's talking about needing to go to the office or needing to talk to someone at work about a project or, whatever the situation could be. Those are clues that he's thinking he shouldn't be at home or he shouldn't be where he is. He needs to be somewhere else. So that's a sign, and it could be relative to whatever the situation is. And if he's having difficulty finding the bathroom or the kitchen or a specific room in the house. So say he says to you, I need to go to the bathroom, but then he ends up in the closet in the bedroom, or he ends up in the kitchen. Those are signs that he is getting lost in the house, which will happen. And eventually what could happen is while he's lost in the house, he's going to open a door and walk out looking for whatever it is he's trying to find. So those are some signs and things to look for. Even when he's at home, if he makes the comment that he wants to go home, even when he is at home, what happens is sometimes they get confused on where they are, especially if you've remodeled or if you've moved in the past, say 10 years even, because they go back to basically who they were in midlife typically. And if you lived in a different place, he might be confusing the two environments. So those are some things as well. Again, if his environment has changed in the past several years, that could be a problem. But just keep an eye on him. And if he seems restless and he seems like he's looking to get out of the house, that's something else. And then once he starts showing those signs, if he starts showing those signs, then go back to the tips that we just went over to prevent the wandering. And always, reach out to your local sheriff's office or your agency on aging or your local Alzheimer's association and get some ideas from them for your local area that might help you out.
Again, some great answers there, Karen. Thank you so much. Those are kind of the majority of the questions that we've had on wandering, but we did have some other questions in regards to Alzheimer's. And again, if you have more questions, if you're listening, you want to type them into the chat box, please feel free to do so. And just as a reminder, we will send this back out to you, both the slides and the transcript of this, so you will get this. I've been getting a couple questions about that, so I wanted to make that reminder. Oh, and we just had somebody write in. So we have a question here from Sheila. She asks, does wandering episode and hallucination go hand in hand, or are they separate? My mother got out of the house in the middle of the night, and when she finally got back in the house hours later, she said there are little men that walked with her in the beautiful garden. That is a good question. What, Karen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yes, I do. Oh, Sheila, I'm so sorry. That must have been so stressful to you in the middle of the night to be out searching for your mom, and you were so worried about her. And then you get her, and she's like, oh, everything was fine. The little men were helping while she walked in the beautiful garden. So, so my hat's off to you. And yes, to answer your question directly, many times wandering and hallucinations go hand in hand for several reasons. Sometimes what happens is the part of the brain that's being affected at that time that causes your loved one to not be able to recognize where they are or to feel like they need to be somewhere that they're not, is also causing them to maybe see people or things that aren't there, or to hallucinate that people are after them, or somebody is in the house that shouldn't be and they need to get away from them. So there definitely are correlations to hallucinating and wandering, because a lot of times with the hallucination comes the need for them to leave the environment that they're in. So in their mind, of course, they're not wandering. They are, for very valid reasons in their mind, going and trying to get to the place that they're trying to get to. Or in your mom's case, she's just out for a walk with the little tiny people. So it can be very scary for you, and it can be scary and confusing for that person. But a lot of times, if they're hallucinating something nice like this, it's not. But sometimes it can be scary for them because they're hallucinating that somebody's trying to get them, or somebody's breaking in, and that is scary. That is very scary for them. And so you have to remember that when you are trying to talk to them. In their mind, this is real. This is happening. And so I definitely encourage you to talk to the doctor, because there is medication. Again, I don't advocate a lot for a lot of medication, but with hallucinations, sometimes you can get medicine that will help with those, and in turn, it might possibly help with the wandering as well.
Those are some great suggestions, and I liked how, Karen, you mentioned sometimes it's because they feel unsafe, and it's so important to reassure them that they are in a safe place, that you're there, you're going to keep them safe. And sometimes physical touch can be so soothing and comforting, a hug or holding their hand, saying, I'm sorry you're so scared, I know you're safe. But we just had a question. Somebody wrote in and said, what if they get to a point in the dementia where they don't like to be touched? They don't like that physical contact anymore. She said Joan wrote this in, and she said she's noticed that with her brother. Do you have any comments on that, Karen? She's kind of asking, do patients with dementia usually get to a point where they don't like to be touched? Is that common? Did you notice that in your caregiving situation? Any thoughts there, Karen?
Yes, that actually can be common, and for a couple of reasons. And one of the reasons, not necessarily all the time, but one of the reasons is they could actually have something wrong with them that's not the dementia. So, sometimes when you don't feel good, you don't want anybody to touch you. For example, I'm just going to throw it out there, like the flu. When you have the flu and you sort of ache all over, you don't want anybody to touch you. Or maybe if you have a sunburn, of course, you don't want anybody to touch you. So sometimes with dementia, a person can feel those types of sensations. They don't necessarily need to be sick or be sunburnt, but they just don't want to have that sensation of touch on their body. So don't take it personal. I know if it's your spouse or your parent, you want to just go up and give them a big hug. And for you, your sense of touch to them is letting them know they're loved and that they're safe. But again, when somebody has dementia, it's not your cues that you have to watch, it's their cues. And what I mean by that is your cues are what you would want somebody to do for you or what you think they want. But what you have to pay attention to is what they're comfortable with and what is making them feel good. So although typically you would be able to hug them or hold their hand or maybe rub their back or their arm and so forth, and that gives you a great sense of comfort, if they are asking you not to do that, then you need to respect that. That being said, please pay attention. Is this something that's very sudden, and then it goes away, and then it comes back, and if it's a specific part of their body that they don't want you to touch, then those are cues as well that maybe something isn't right. Maybe something is hurting them. I know I read a story a long time ago that the person that was being cared for was very agitated and didn't want anybody to touch them, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. Well, you know what it was? Their shirt that they had on, the tag, was rubbing their skin. And we've all had a tag at some point in time that rubbed our skin, and it's very annoying. But they couldn't articulate that this was what was wrong. They couldn't quite articulate it, and they couldn't figure it out. And so it took a while for the caregiver to understand why this person was agitated and and it took some time, it took some patience, and they had to sit and, it was like figuring out a puzzle. So I highly encourage you to try to figure out exactly why they are no longer wanting to be touched, and it might be something as simple as they just don't want it, and there's no particular reason. But if there is, maybe a stomach ache or a headache or something else, then you definitely want to try to figure that out as well so you can help them feel better.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. We are getting some great questions that people are typing in, and this one kind of goes back to wandering, but I also get this question a lot. So Julie sent this in. Thanks, Julie. She says, my husband was diagnosed last year with early onset at age of 53. He does not currently wander, but most days he states that he wants to go home, even when he is home. What's the best way to handle this situation? I hear about this a lot. So, Karen, any thoughts on that?
Yes, that is very common. Thank you, Julie, for writing in and for listening. And I just want to send my kudos out to you for being such a great caregiver for your husband, because it is really difficult. It sounds like he has the early onset, like my husband did, and that's a tough road. So please let us know if there's anything that we can do on our end to help you as well. So yes, if he is saying that he wants to go home even when he is home, again, my question to you is, one, have you guys moved in the past, recent years? And, when he says home, is that the home he's talking about? Or is he talking about his childhood home? I don't know if he is currently 53 or if that's just when he was diagnosed. But, again, it's like figuring out a puzzle. What exactly is he referring to when he refers to home? Is he referring to the home that you're currently living in or a past one? And then you can just try to show him artifacts in your house that will remind him that it is his home. But that, you said he's not currently wandering, but that is an indication that he might. So please be prepared for him to possibly start wandering. So make a list of places that he could go that he would be thinking would be his home. Know your neighborhood, know who you can call right away, and also, make sure you have some sort of identification on him, whether it's a medic alert bracelet or one of those GPS tracking devices we mentioned earlier, so that should this happen, you will be prepared at a moment's notice to try to get some help right away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Karen. And we had somebody write in a suggestion. Joan, thank you so much. She said, a good book to read is The 36-Hour Day. It helps you better understand the whole process. And I hear that that's a great book. So I've bought it. I have yet to read it. It's in my queue of books I want to read. So thanks, Joan, for writing in. And then
that is so awesome. I have to say, I'm sorry, Lakelyn, for interrupting, but okay. Joan, you might be after my job because I'm sitting here with the 36-hour day right in front of me, and before we got off this call today, I was going to recommend it. So, Joan, you're one step ahead of me. Thank you so much for sending that in, because I do recommend a 36-hour day to all caregivers, not just about wandering and the issues we're talking about today, but just the basic facts and how to cope and how to get outside help, financial and legal issues. The 36-hour day covers it all. And then also, I was going to, while we're on this subject, I was going to mention Confidence to Care by Molly Carpenter, because it also is a great resource for caregivers, and it has a lot of tips in it as well. So those are two great books that I do recommend. So, Joan, I don't know. Maybe if I'm not available for one of these calls, you can take over and fill in for me.
That's such a fun coincidence. Well, yeah, those both are great book suggestions, and we'll make sure to add that to the email that we send out at the end of this. Add those to our resources. And I know we have about 15 minutes left, so I wanted to get to a few questions that we received that don't necessarily deal with wandering specifically, but we had two questions come in about talking to their loved ones about Alzheimer's, and they're asking, what do we tell them? So I'm going to read just one of the two questions, but they both kind of ask the same thing. So this one comes from Stacy. The other question came in from Susan. But Stacy writes, my husband is 58 years old, diagnosed last year. He's doing well, staying focused on the positive, enjoying the things he can still do. But I realize from our conversations that he doesn't quite know the progression of his condition, and that he will certainly get worse, and that the Alzheimer's disease is ultimately fatal. Right now, I just stay silent when our talks turn towards the future. Is there any point in being brutally honest so he knows what's coming? I try to keep focused on what we still have today, but my heart is breaking. So any advice, Karen, to these caregivers who are trying to figure out, do I talk to my loved one about the disease? Do we talk about what's coming next? Or do we just kind of sweep it under the rug and celebrate, what we can still do together in the time we still have? That's a really tough question.
It is. And Stacy, thank you so much for writing this in. And to all the caregivers out there dealing with this particular thing, this is so common. And part of the reason it's so common is a lot of times it's very difficult to get a diagnosis. And then once you do, the doctors have not been trained and are not comfortable talking to family and to the diagnosed person about this disease. They don't have a cure like they do with so many diseases, and they don't really have a lot of treatments. They have some drugs they can give you. I'm very familiar with those, so you don't have to write in and tell me about them with Namenda and Aricept and so forth. But all they do really is stave off some of the effects. The progression of the disease is still the same. And so for a doctor on their end, this is one of the most difficult tasks that they face. And like most humans, what they tend to do is just not face it. And they might give you a mild cognitive impairment diagnosis. They might actually diagnose you with some form of dementia. But then typically they send you on your way without really going over what an Alzheimer's or dementia diagnosis means. And to me, this is heartbreaking on so many levels because it does a family disservice. First of all, Stacy and anybody else with a new diagnosis, I want you to, first of all, I know you didn't ask this particular question, but I would like for you to make sure you have everything in order while your husband is still very capable. And by that I mean your legal documents. I hope that you have already spoken with an elder care attorney who can specialize with you in getting a power of attorney set, your medical directive set, a last will and testament or a trust set up, those types of things while your husband is able to verbalize this with a sound mind. So I think that's really, really important. And I believe with my whole heart that's something that the doctor should tell somebody as soon as they have a diagnosis. And to be honest with you, in many states, they are working on getting this requirement. There are some bills before Congress that cover this as well, so that a person with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another dementia basically gets a care team just like they would get with, say, cancer. And so you would have a social worker assigned to you, a neuropsychologist, a neurologist, and your family care provider. So I know that's a little bit more information than what you asked, but please make sure you start getting everything together and don't wait. Now, to get to the crux of your question, which is very difficult because I actually went through this with Jim, my husband. It's a very hard question to answer because I don't know you and I don't know your husband, and I don't know how that will affect him. We have some friends that we met through our support group, and he's very aware of his diagnosis. He's actually 53 years old, and he has a great attitude about it. He knows what's coming, and so he takes life by the reins and lives each moment and appreciates it and is so glad that he knows what's coming so that he can appreciate today. That's his personality, and that's the way he and his wife have chosen to face the disease together. Now, that being said, I also know other people that have been diagnosed, and it has sent them into a tailspin where they have become depressed and despondent, and it's just the opposite effect. So you really don't know exactly how your husband is going to react, but for me personally, Jim and I had a lot of conversations. He knew what was coming because his mom and his brother both had succumbed to early onset Alzheimer's. So he was very aware of what was coming. Sometimes what is best for you isn't necessarily best for him, and vice versa. And that is something I encourage you to talk to a counselor about, or possibly your pastor or a good friend who knows you both. And I will tell you this from my own personal experience. Jim knew what was coming, and so he and I could have some great conversations that helped me make decisions later on. I could go back and revisit those conversations about what his wishes were at the end. I could go back and think about how he comforted me to let me know he was okay, that he was fine, that he was happy, that he trusted me to take good care of him and to make the right decisions for him, and things like that. If you have children, this is an opportunity to encourage him while he can to write letters to them, or you guys can make videos for them. And the only way he's really going to do that is if he knows what's coming. And that's a really, really hard conversation to have. I know your heart really is breaking, and it's easier to put it off because you can always say, well, we'll have that conversation tomorrow. And somehow what happens with dementia is they have this slow decline where each day something seems to be missing a little bit more and more until all of a sudden 6 months later you look back and you see the decline that's happened. And so I do encourage you, if you are going to have this conversation, to go ahead and have it now rather than later, because you just don't know how quickly he is going to decline. The only thing you do know for sure, and I'm sorry to say this to you because it's so negative and so hard, is that he is going to decline because there is no cure, as you said. And so that becomes very, very difficult to do. And if you want to have somebody there, if you have a pastor you're close to, you may want to have them there to say some prayers and to rely on your religion to help you guys get through this. But I also encourage you, like you said, you still have today. Make the most. Have him write out his bucket list. That's what Jim did, and we tried to check off as many things as we could. Get out on the beautiful days and enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the birds. If there's a place you guys enjoy going every year on an annual trip, keep doing those. Take lots of pictures. Have those good heart-to-heart conversations, because although they're hard to have, one day when you look back, they will make it so much better for you as the caregiver to think back and to know, in your heart what he was thinking and feeling, and that you did the best thing that you could for him by doing what he wished and not necessarily what you wished. So Stacy, stay strong. If there's anything else that we can do, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to send them in.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. What great advice for those families out there that are struggling with that same issue of, do we talk about it, do we not? It sounds like talking about it can be a great way to help the family process the whole disease and think about the future while still enjoying the time they have together. So thank you so much for that. And I think we have time for just one more question. I'm going to do kind of a short one. We had Josie write in. She said, my spouse is in his mid-stages of dementia and keeps insisting on buying things he doesn't need. What do I do? So I thought that was kind of a short and sweet question that, since we only have a few more minutes, I thought maybe you could address if you have any advice for Josie.
Yes, Josie, this is a very common problem. I know Jim, my husband's mom, did this. Boy, she got on QVC and she purchased gobs and gobs of things that they didn't need, and a lot of duplicate things. Well, a couple of simple suggestions would be, one, if you can, take away the credit card so they cannot purchase things, or give them just a small amount of money. Maybe if you're going shopping, some cash. Hopefully they won't lose it if you're with them, and let them know that's all that you have. Sometimes what you can do is keep the receipts and return them at a later date, just depending on how they're purchasing the items. Are you with them? Are you not? Are they having them delivered? So you can try to prevent it, and if you can't, try to make sure that there's a good return policy. You can block them sometimes from using a credit card, but then they could have an anger issue come out of that. So without knowing a whole lot of information, just based on your quick question, and I apologize I can't be more specific to you, but try to think outside of the box so that you can keep your loved one happy, so they do feel like they're contributing in society. One of the things that is really hard for a dementia patient is when they feel like they have lost their sense of independence. And so shopping, being able to go out and buy something, is a sense of independence. Driving, it's a sense of independence. And when those things are taken away, sometimes it can have ill effects. So we want to make sure that you can keep that from happening. So try to be preventive and just think outside of the box with what you can do there.
Thank you so much. And we had one quick suggestion from Joan. I know she's the one that suggested the book, but she said, I found if you can find humor and remain light-hearted, it helps your loved one. It can be very depressing, but make an effort to remain light instead of sad, and this can help. So that's always a good thing to remember. Alzheimer's disease, another dimension, when we talk about it, when we talk about how these are, this disease is affecting our loved ones and the strain it puts on the family caregiver, it can kind of be depressing. So if everyone can remember, too, to find the joy and to find the humor in some situations, it can really make the caregiving experience so much more enjoyable, or at least give a break from the sadness or the struggle for at least a little bit. Laughter is the best medicine. That's what they say. So thanks again, Joan, for that comment. And with that,
I agree.
Yeah. And with that, we have come to the end of the hour. So I wanted to thank Karen once again for being with us here. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question in this session, but we will have one more live chat before the end of the year, so I hope you'll tune in for that. And then we also have some resources here. We have Help for Alzheimer's Families. We have Confidence to Care. I know Karen had mentioned the book. That is on that website. We have a Facebook page, Remember for Alzheimer's Families. And there is a newsletter that I do that coincides with that. We also have Prevent Wandering and the Missing Senior Network. I talked about that. That's the online resource that you can shoot out a message to your network if a loved one is wandering. And then Karen's website, thegarnerfoundation.org and missingjim.com. So Karen, thank you again for being here today, for sharing your advice and your experience. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for listening, for your great questions. I hope maybe, Lakelyn, some of the questions we couldn't get to, maybe possibly we can get to them on our next call, or if somebody wants to send them in, I can answer them through our website, helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. We do have a link on there that you can type in a question, and then I'll answer them on there for you as well.
Good suggestion. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope to chat with you again towards the end of the year. Have a wonderful fall season, and we'll be talking to you all soon. Bye now.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.